South Africa's economic activity is projected to contract by 7.2% this year. That's according to an IMF report. What has been the impact of COVID-19 on South Africa, and what sectors have been hit the hardest? COVID-19 brought a decline of about 18% in employment between February and April. Every third income earner in February did not earn a salary in April, and job losses were felt where most among women and manual laborers, those at the bottom of the income distribution chain, suffered the most. To expand this discussion, we're now joined by the Free Market Foundation's Louw to give us a sense of the impact of the economic recovery plan announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa. Leon, a very good morning to you, and thank you for your time. There's been a mixed emotions, I suppose, around the President's speech on Thursday. Some have criticized the recovery plan as lacking in method and in vision. How credible do you believe it to be?
Yes, so of course it's predictable because it's a mixture of indifferent, good and bad. And the good part is left right till the end, I suppose he would say, that keeping the best for last, which is quite bold if it actually happens. For example, reducing business barriers or red tape or regulation by 50%, by freeing up the economy, which is the only way to get an economy to grow all over the world. There's one simple process, which is freer economies grow and less free economies stagnate. Or more specifically, if you move towards more freedom, you grow. If you move away, which we have been doing, you stagnate. And then most of it, unfortunately, is indeed justifies the criticism that it lacks anything. It's just a long list of things the government will do, spend money, which it doesn't have. And then it says at the end it's going to reduce the deficit and reduce the budget and reduce government spending and reprioritize. So it seemed as if there's a contradiction. It's not possible to spend more and more and more on infrastructure and welfare and so on, and at the same time to spend less. It's one or the other. So the criticisms are correct and incorrect. There are parts of it which are very good indeed if they actually happen, and there's a lot of it which actually will achieve nothing.
The other aspect that you also raise in your press release here is what's bad about this plan is that it's recycling old failed policies, and a really important part of it is the part that you say it wants to produce locally what should be imported. The reason for exports is to maximize imports. Now, looking at that aspect, especially as we're in a state where South Africa is really essentially much poorer than it was before COVID-19 struck, even though the economy wasn't as stable even before COVID-19, pardon me. The focal point is jobs, and a lot of it has to do with ensuring that we all buy locally and there is a bulk of local production. What were you trying to say here as you explain the advantages of importing and maximizing those imports?
Well, there's a lot of mythology about the belief that if you produce locally, you create jobs. This is just simply, frankly, nonsense. There's a thing in law called the law of comparative advantage, and you export. We want exports. Why do we want exports? We want exports to be able to import. The purpose of an export is importing. You don't export because you want to send your goods to other countries. You import because you want to buy from other countries. So what you do in your private home and in your country and in your city and in your province, everywhere, what you do is you let other people do what they do well. You do what you do well. You sell what you do well in order to buy what you don't do well. So foreign trade, international trade, as every economist knows, is a way to make a country wealthier. We want in South Africa more imports. We want more stuff. Now, how do we get more stuff? How do we get more machinery and technology and cell phones and TV sets and so on? Well, the answer is we export. And what do we export? We export what we're good at, which is, for example, producing minerals, agricultural products. You know, what we do is we put wine on a ship, we send it over the horizon, and it returns with Japanese cars. There's this fantastic bioconversion out at sea that turns wine into motor cars. Now, that's what we want. And so this idea that you produce locally is an old myth. It's one of the things that Trump is on about and doesn't understand basic economics is you want to import. More imports you get, the better. And the way you get more imports is to export. And the way you export is to do what you do well, not to do what you do badly, which is what so-called localization or beneficiation or domestication, all of these funny words, really don't understand about basic economics.
Then if that's the sort of idea that you're speaking to here, how then do we begin to stimulate the economy? I mean, government has huge plans when it comes to, for example, stimulating the township economy, ensuring that there are business owners and entrepreneurs who are exchanging products and services within the township.
Well, it's not rocket science. It's very simple. And, you know, we hear it in State of the Nation address after State of the Nation address, ministers' budget speeches. They carry on and on and on about removing red tape. And while they're doing it in Parliament are a whole lot of laws increasing red tape, which is the case now. For example, there's a law in Parliament now called the Upgrading of Land Tenure Rights Act, which will take away millions of black people's homes, literally millions, probably 4 or 5 million houses will be taken without compensation, not of the rich, not of farmers, not of people in Bryanston and Consentia, but poor people in townships. So what you do is you give them full title deeds, you remove all the red tape and regulations, you allow freedom of trade, and that all over the world is what produces regeneration and growth amongst small and low income and poor people. It's not rocket science. You simply look around the world and you do what works and you stop doing what fails. It's easy. There's an index called the Economic Freedom of the World Index that measures 42 indicators that are objectively produced around the world, including by our central bank and by our treasury. And what you do is you get a better score on those. In other words, you relax controls and regulations. Instead of what they actually do is increase and intensify them. I'll give you another practical and very simple example. We have in South Africa new, very, very strict laws regarding financial services and intermediary provisions. Those laws make it essentially impossible for low-income people to get financial services, for low-income people to go into financial services. It confines the markets to sophisticated, high-income people, which is why, for example, the Black Brokers Association of South Africa, which was one of the very big growing entrepreneurial sectors, providing services to spaza shop owners and people with township houses and so on, that's virtually out of business, been driven out of business, completely contrary to transformation. What you want to do is scrap those laws, free up the credit markets, allow credit to reach the poor, allow the poor to own their businesses and their homes, get rid of the red tape and regulations and the bribery that comes with them. It's actually quite simple and straightforward. Unfortunately, there are a few words to that effect in the plan, but no detail. In other words, there doesn't seem to be an understanding of what must in fact be done.
As you speak to that, another criticism is that the plan fails to give strategic direction on what type of growth is needed in the country. What do you believe to be the sort of commitments that are needed to ensure that this plan does indeed become effective?
Yes, the commitments we need are firstly to say we're going to put a freeze on all new laws that make it more difficult to employ people, more costly, more risky, more difficult to start businesses. We need to say that what we care about is jobs for people who don't have jobs. And the way you do that is not to increase the benefits for people who have jobs. The way you do that is to give people without a job the freedom to get a job. My colleague Eustace Davies suggested that people get job seekers exemption certificates or JSECs, which is a certificate that allows an unemployed person to take any job they can get. Focus the rights and the freedom and on the unemployed. Let them seek jobs. Stop worrying about the people who employ and the people who are employed. They are lucky. They're fortunate. Forget about them. Start thinking about the people who don't have a business and don't have a job, and how can you make it possible for them to get a job? Having said that, I just want to point out the inhumanity of unemployment. Young black South African women are about 60 to 70% unemployed. In other words, every 3 young black women you see, 2 of them don't have a job, have never had a job, and will probably never get a job unless the labor market is freed up. That means, unfortunately, getting rid of minimum wage laws or giving people exemption from minimum wage laws, giving people exemption from labor laws until they have a job. When they've got a job, they will learn the skills in order to improve their quality of living, the incomes and so on. That's what you do. You want people to learn on the job. In order to do that, they must first have a job.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for your time. Free Market Foundation's Louw speaking to some aspects of the President's economic recovery plan. Now